I'd like to go ahead and introduce Dave Lennox. He's a university architect from the University Architect and Campus Planning Office.
Good morning. Thank you. I am the director of that department along with Kathy Blake, who is also the senior landscape architect. And today I'm going to give you an overview of how the campus planning, how the architecture, landscape architecture impacts the projects you may be working on. We'll talk a little bit about standards that we have and also a little bit how to work with our historical stewardship. I see the role of our department really as being the stewards of the campus aesthetics and planning, and we work hard to make sure that there's consistency in the projects that we work on as well as the projects that you'll be working on. And when it comes to architecture, it comes to palette, standards for site furnishings, landscape, how circulation works on campus. And I think it's an important responsibility, and usually when there's a problem, the Board of Trustees comes to us and says, why does that look that way? So that's why it's important to really stay true to some of those standards that we've developed. We do have a long-range vision for campus. This has been developed and is really a dynamic plan for campus based on the original Olmsted plan, and this is a very helpful tool for us, especially you've seen a lot of the infrastructure work going on right now. Where do the utilities go? Because we have this plan, we're able to put utilities where they belong for the next 25 years, not where the road happens to be today. But it also helps us select sites. If any of you are actually participating in a building, a new building, this has really helped us in the last 5 years to put things in the right place. That's important because as we grow, we're developing precincts, individual schools, whether it's School of Medicine or School of Business or Science and Engineering Quad, and the connections between these places to get people to move around clearly is something we have to focus on because it encourages the multidisciplinary collaboration that really is what the university is about today. And it's really within this spirit that our work supports creating a sense of place. I mean, most people come to Stanford and say, wow, this is this great place, and everything seems to tie together. And so whether it's the architecture or the landscape or whether we're working with Fac Ops to pick the right shade of black for the main quad windows, or whether we're working with housing to pick a palette of new colors for Escondido Village, all of it really is about stewardship of the aesthetic of campus. We've developed a few tools that I think have been very helpful for us. This is a service level tool that helps us prioritize where renewal money goes, where maintenance money goes, where we might pay a little more attention to the aesthetics. There's 4 different levels of service buildings. The campus landmarks is the #1 level. That's in red, main quad, of course. What that means is when someone goes in and wants to paint a window because it's peeling, they may think twice about maybe they should paint all 10 of those windows in that arcade because it's a really important place. The second is about really operations and research intensive. Not all of our buildings are old, but some of them are very important. If you take School of Business or the SEQ, a lot of people visit here. We want to maintain these really well also, but they also, especially in engineering and in the sciences, need to operate. Their mechanical systems need to work for their research. Heritage buildings, we've called in yellow, #3. There's a lot of historic buildings on our campus that aren't necessarily the landmark type buildings that we all take pictures in front of with our parents and prospective students, but they're buildings like Robley Dorm, Robley Gym that have historic cachet. It's important to make sure that we pay attention to those as well. And then in green are the general maintenance buildings. I don't like to say these are the average buildings. These are the baseline. We do a really good job maintaining all of our buildings on campus, as you've taken tours of your friends. So this is really the baseline. We've also followed suit and worked to develop a tool for the connective elements, or the landscape as we call them, and we've developed priority areas as well. So for example, in maintenance level A, which is in red again, this is where you want to make sure it's manicured. The edges of the grass are perfect. The grass might be cut 2 or 3 times a week versus 1 time a week. If there is a bush missing in that hedge, it gets replaced and replaced well. And you can tell and you can dial down on these different areas. One of the reasons this is important to you is that if you take Campus Drive, for example, the blue loop, There are many different entities on Campus Drive. We have DAPR, we have housing, we have school of business, we have medicine, and many of these are maintained by different types of groups. And they need to understand that we really want a cohesive, high-quality parkway that goes around campus, and that there are certain expectations. So this is why I think this would be helpful for many of you. I give tours a lot. I'm sure you've all given tours to your family and friends. And one of the comments I always get is, wow, this place is just beautiful. It's manicured. It's kept up so well. But I also get the question, how does this all tie together? I walk around here and I feel like it all really ties together. And I would say the answer is standards. One of the things that we've been really proactive about is making sure that there are standards in terms of the architecture, the scale, the palette of our materials, but also the connective elements. So signs, site furniture, the way we do bike parking, the way we do pathway, the way we manage our historic resources. These are all important sort of tools that have helped us keep this campus sort of feeling like one place. And we do have resources for all of these. Almost ad nauseum, we have central campus design guidelines if you're doing a building. We have interior guidelines for the main quad. For example, all buildings facing an arcade need to be Navajo white. We didn't want a lot of different colors. We have guidelines for how you pick an architect and design team. We also have guidelines, again, Campus Drive. If you're ever doing a project or maintenance on Campus Drive, we know that we want to maintain certain setbacks, that there's certain vegetation, there's certain character. How do you do bike paths? How do you do lighting? It all ties in and is included in these guidelines as well. Bioswales is something as of within the last 10 years that has really come to the forefront. And you know, we have a lot of consultants come in and they just want to dig a ditch and pour some plants in there, and they don't live because there's not enough water in the dry times, and there's too much water in the wet times. And so we really have worked hard with grounds to develop good bioswale guidelines. There's a landscape white paper, a great tool to ground you in the foundations and principles of why we do landscape the way we do it. And all of these elements, I'd like to say they're aesthetically derived, but I think more importantly they're derived from experience on campus. So we know, for example, we're trying to change out ash urns because they have become receptacles for trash. We work hard bike parking. We recommend that you put 2 rows of shrubs in instead of 1 because students will trample it and it'll never live. And these are the kind of things you learn. And we get questioned about why do you do it that way, but they're really based on experience. So whether it's site furniture or directories, bike lockers, car parking, these are all based on the way we observe people using the university. Probably the most complex of all of these components is signage. We don't want this to become a retail mall of signage extraordinaire, but there are a lot of different types we have to pay attention to. There's regulatory signage. There are behavioral signs, don't ride your bike in the arcades, don't smoke here. There are signs that show you where to go. There's maps, there are ADA signs. And one thing that we really encourage is making sure that we standardize those as much as possible so this place doesn't look like an amusement park. One of the hardest things to do is donor signage. We've had many experiences where someone's taken the lead in their building. You know, we have a lot of wonderful donors at Stanford, and you get very passionate about wanting to please them. And we've had instances of someone getting 12-inch letters in the lobby anointing the corner they donated, and then you go to the next building where the family gave $75 million and their letters are 4 inches high. And it really is important to maintain equity. So if you're doing a donor plaque or any type of donor signage in your building, it needs to run through our office as well as the Office of Development, and it really helps keep balance, which is important to get more money. Helpful links. Yeah, scratch that from the recording. Helpful links, of course. Our website is a wealth of information. Most of these documents you can find very easily, as well as these guidelines and standards and these contacts. I just wanted to highlight the historical component of this because we mentioned Dr. Jones and Julie Kane's here. Deal with Sapna Marfadia in our department on our historical resources. If you have a building that is over 50 years old, you have to call our office, and we work with Laura and Julie to make sure that we document what you're doing make sure you can do what you want to do. The county is very much concerned now both with exterior and interior of our precious resources that are a little bit older. So that's a really important part, whether you're row houses or dealing with an academic building in the middle of campus. So I'd like to introduce George Sandoval next.
Good morning. Boy, I always hate to follow the architect and planning office because they just have such wonderful photos and slides, so it's just hard to compare. But what better justification than those beautiful facilities to justify the plans review process? Those type of facilities don't happen by accident. It takes a lot of standards, as Dave mentioned. It takes a lot of communication, and it takes a lot of hard looking at drawings and making sure that they fit the program's intent. So good morning. I'm George Sandoval. I'm the Director of Zone Management. And Zone Management is responsible for facilities engineering and maintenance in academic buildings at Stanford. Zone Management, together with operations, forms buildings and grounds maintenance. Bob Fritsch will be talking about operations after me. So some of the topics I'll be talking about this morning are, what are the groups on campus that do plans review or are involved in the process? Why do plans review? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages or penalties if you don't? What are some of the many systems and services that are impacted by DMP projects? Some of these you may not be aware of. And then I'll go through the steps of the plans review process and share with you some of the website resources that are available on our BGM website. And as I said earlier, Bob Fritsch will talk about operational and maintenance support for your projects. So as you can see from this long list, there's quite a bit of organizations on campus that do facilities support of buildings. Land, buildings, and real estate, of course, which buildings and grounds maintenance is part of. Earlier, Charles mentioned that our real estate group also does maintenance of our leased buildings, with our third-party contractors. Got residential and dining enterprises, athletics, School of Medicine, hospital, faculty, staff, housing, SLAC, EH&S, and Stanford University Fire Marshal's Office is responsible for maintenance and inspection of a lot of their systems in our buildings, as is ITS for all the telecommunications equipment. And there's other groups as well. There's areas in our buildings that may be kitchens that are maintained by third-party vendors. There's lab equipment that is maintained by special groups, either within Stanford or third-party. This is a zone map that's available on our BGM website. It indicates through color coding what are the different facilities zones on campus. The academic zones, zones A, B, C, and D, are indicated on the map in red and light blue, yellow, and green. But as you can see, there's all those other groups I mentioned earlier, School of Medicine, hospital, athletics, R&DE, et cetera. It's very important for you to know what buildings your projects are taking place in and what maintenance groups support those buildings. So here are our zone managers for our 4 academic zones, A through D. Qua, Bob, KB, and Steve. So why do plans review? Well, the 2 top items, of course, reducing costs and schedule days are some of the most important things for project managers. The old adage, measure twice and cut once, certainly applies to construction projects. It's a lot easier to fix mistakes on paper than it is to fix them in the field. And of course, your contractors just can't wait to give you those bargain discounts on change orders. So regulations and permits can really be a challenge here. And it's a lot easier if you can address those issues during plans review rather than waiting for county plan check or even worse, final inspection to find out you have problems. We've learned sometimes the hard way of the county special requirements and their interpretations. So benefit from our experience. We can help you in those areas. One of the main priorities of projects is to meet the program's requirements, not only at turnover, but throughout the life of the program. That won't happen unless you closely involve your maintenance organization throughout the project, from design to construction to turnover. Most DMP projects take place in occupied buildings, and it is very easily to impact your neighbors, either through improper shutdown planning or maybe taking all of a building's resources. You might think that the building has enough airflow or process cooling water or electricity to meet your project's needs, but you'll rob your neighbors. So it's very important that you minimize impact to surrounding facilities through the plans review process and working with your maintenance groups. You know, you can really extend the life and return on investment of your project by making sure that your projects are specified with long-lasting, reliable equipment. And we can certainly help you in this process through the plans review process. Safety and security, you know, those are the #1 priorities here at Stanford, not only during construction, but, you know, during the life of the facility that you build. So it's really important to get those things right. Sustainability and energy conservation are high priorities here at Stanford. Stanford spends millions of dollars retrofitting existing buildings and facilities to get more energy savings. A lot of those costs could have been avoided if the facilities would have been designed energy efficient to begin with. So your department managed projects, we can help you design them to the most current energy efficient standards if you work with us. And probably the most important thing of all is you know, utilize all the in-house resources we have here at Stanford. We have a lot of people, professionals that are just ready, willing, and able to help you on your projects. So the best project managers are those that know how to leverage themselves by taking the most advantage of Stanford's resources. Today's buildings are very complex. They have a bunch of interrelated facilities that if you change one thing, it very often impacts another. A very typical DMP project might be converting one big room into 2 small rooms. Sounds like a simple project, but it could very easily impact all of these systems that you see on this page. And very often people don't think about those things. What side of the wall is the thermostat on? What side of the wall did the supply diffuser fall on? Are you impacting things like flooring? You know, special flooring requires special maintenance. Did we tell the janitors that? Very often we've had new flooring ruined because that information wasn't communicated. So as you can see, there's a lot of potential impacts if you don't go through the plans review process and talk with the experts. The plans review process is actually quite simple, despite what you might see from the schematic. It looks kind of complicated, but in order to save the most money and prevent schedule impact, it's good to do plans review at least three stages during the project process. Depending on the project size, it's typically at schematic design, design development, and at construction drawings. So it's pretty simple. Project manager submits the plans to Maps and Records. There's a transmittal sheet on the BGM website that you just add and you send that through. Maps and Records has a distribution list that they send out to. So all of your drawings, we communicate that they're available at Maps and Records for review. The departments review and make comments. Typically, you should give them 10 days. And then applicable departments send their comments back to the project manager. And the project manager hopefully then distributes those comments to the consultant team and the contractors. And the project manager also sends the responses back from his team to Maps and Records so they can be shared with all the stakeholder groups. This is an excerpt from our plans review transmittal letter. It shows some of the different groups involved in plans review. The project manager is supposed to indicate the groups that are necessary to review the drawings, but don't worry if you don't know. We'll help you on this, and we'll review the set. Our plans review coordinator will review the drawings and indicate the groups that need to review these various drawing sets and specifications. So plans review is just a subset of the whole project support process. So the first phase, planning and design, yes, there's certain deliverables that need to be provided for our plans review. Basis of design, any deviations from our facilities design guidelines, commissioning strategy on the project should be submitted. And then we provide support we assign a zone representative to work with the project. And again, it's throughout the project from planning, design, construction, and closeout. So the purpose of this chart is just to list some of the different deliverables at those different phases and to make clear that it is not just a plans review process, but a whole commissioning process. You know, during construction, there's submittals and RFIs that need to be reviewed by the various groups. responsible for the facilities. Any new equipment, we need training scheduled. And then at the end of the project, I think Schumann's going to talk a little bit about maps and records requirements, but maintenance gets heavily involved with project closeout, looking at punch list, operations and maintenance manuals, making sure that all the record as-built drawings have been submitted. And of course, that we have all the contact information and warranty letters. Because remember, once the contractor walks off the job, the people you're going to be working with are your maintenance groups. So it's very important that we do a good closeout and turnover to make the project sustainable. This is a page from our BGM website. It lists a lot of the resources available for contractors and project managers. I'll just go over some of the highlights. You see our plans review process is indicated. So if you want to learn more about our plans review process, it's here. Maps and Records has an online archive of all projects ever done in buildings on campus, and you can look at drawings and specifications for a lot of our old projects. Our Facilities Information Management System is a treasure trove of information regarding buildings, things like square footage, floor plans, occupancy space information. Of course, our facilities design guidelines are also referenced on this site. Shutdowns, you need to do a shutdown for your project. The shutdown process is described here, as well as the shutdown notice form. You want to learn more about campus construction projects that may be impacting your project or that you need to coordinate with, there's a campus construction schedule. And to learn more about sustainability at Stanford, we have a link, as well as links to EH&S and ITS's construction sites. So in summary, any project, whether it's department managed or otherwise, requires a team approach to project delivery. So don't forget, you have a team of professionals that know these facilities that are just ready and willing to help you to succeed. So please take advantage of those resources, and your projects will have a higher likelihood of success. Now I'd like to introduce Bob Fritsch with our operations group.
Thank you, George. Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Bob Fritsch. I manage the engineering trades group within operations. Operations, and who are we? We're a group of about 230 people reporting to Director Robert Carpenter, and we're made up of 6 different organizations within that group. The team of 230 people are very highly dedicated and really committed to the highest level of maintenance on campus. Our goal is to provide this beautiful campus. As you drive in every day, you see the maintenance level of the grounds. That's handled by our grounds department. The buildings, our buildings operate so that you can provide the highest level of teaching and research. We also take care of your automobiles, your department-owned cars and carts. We have logistics support, and we put on over 1,000 events a year. So the first group is engineering trades, and again, I'm Bob Fritsch. I manage this group. It's made up of the HVAC department, plumbing, and electric. This group is, they take care of all the preventative maintenance in your buildings, all the reactive calls. When your building is too cold, it's too hot, water's not running, toilets are backed up, lights out, we're the people that you call at 32281, and they respond right away. This group also supplies support 24/7 coverage. We have people on call every day through the weekends as well on nights, so that any emergency calls in your buildings, we're there to support them. We also work on projects, installation, and renewal projects on building systems. Architectural trades, that's managed by Mitch Busan, and that's made up of carpentry, lock, paint, sign, and glass. They also support a lot of your projects with lock and carpentry. Signs are involved in just about every project on campus. Landscaping services are managed by Ted Tolosky, and he takes care of the beautiful grounds. Then we also have logistics. Logistics processes all of our work orders. It tracks those work orders and supplies reports as necessary. They also handle the material acquisition, either through their staff or we have a contract with Granger, an actual on-site storeroom for them. They also manage all of the service contractors, custodial waste, elevators and pest control, as well as DI water. Fleet services and machine, they take care of all your department owned vehicles as well as carts. And the machining service is a customer funded support group that takes care of any of your fabrication needs. And event services, they take care of all the big 5 events as well as at least 1,000 other events per year. Operations is a service center, so everything we do is on a charge-out basis. So with a single work order, there's a number of things that we can do to help support your projects. First is we can work with your design team to evaluate the capacity required or recommend modification to the systems. One of the things I think George mentioned earlier is a lot of the impact that we see are somebody will tie into an air system, they'll tie into a water system, and they'll finish their project and leave, and we get calls later saying, hey, we don't have enough air, the temperature is not right, or there's not enough water supply. So we go back and we take care of those problems, but we can certainly help, and we would like to help in the evaluation of those projects to make sure that the contractor is tying into the right sources for these services. We can also help evaluate materials and make sure that they're maintainable. In our FTGs, we do have a quick guide that outlines most of the typical components that we install and recommend throughout the campus. We can also work with your contractor, do some inspections with you during and after your project is complete. One of the important things there is we can get in there and take a look at it just to make sure there are no problems, or if there are, we catch them right there and we have the contractor correct them right there. Our maintenance program coordinators, or MPCs, are system experts, but not only system experts, but they're experts on your buildings. Mark Conway, Scott Hofflander, Tu Nguyen are most involved in projects. All 3 of them would be more than happy to help evaluate your projects, work with you on any of your projects so that we make sure it's done right, and that at the conclusion they know what the changes in that building are, because they and their staff are going to be maintaining that building going forward. We can also coordinate maintenance services and vendors as well. So the maintenance services, once that project is done, we want to make sure we get all of that information collected and put into our EAM maintenance management system so that we can start performing the routine maintenance and reactive calls on that. We can also help evaluate your bids, and we can even compare some of those costs with our in-house services. Again, our MPCs do a number of installation projects on campus and be more than happy to help evaluate any of your projects. Some helpful links, as you said, the zone management link, operations, maps and records, and USA, I think was talked about earlier. If you're going to do any digging, make sure you take a look at that one. And the BGM work request link. Here's my contact information if you have any questions. And I will now turn it over to Kip Fout with EH&S.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, well, I'm here to discuss environmental health and safety requirements and services related to construction. Specifically, I'm the asbestos-lead and construction safety program manager, but my group is only one of the work groups at EH&S, which is a fairly large department with over 100 employees. The Stanford University Fire Marshal is also in our department, and Aaron McCarthy is going to discuss all those requirements after I'm done. So the other work groups Typically, we have a large health physics department, so if your renovation involves any laboratories with radioactive use, they will get involved. As far as we have the environmental protection programs work group, so which covers anything like hazardous waste, or if you're going to need air permits for things like emergency generators. We have the emergency preparedness program. So if you are going to have to develop some of those stations where you gather in an emergency, you may need input from them as well. So I'm going to discuss basically overall health and safety risk management, which is really the overarching issue around this types of projects. You have to realize that construction is inherently one of the most dangerous work environments there are. There are many injuries and deaths on construction sites every year in the state of California. Because of that, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration has a whole standard dedicated just to construction. And then we're going to talk about assessment, control, and mitigation of hazards in the pre-construction phase, which is this area. But I also want to talk about the same thing during the construction phase as well. So risk management, especially hazardous materials, because this is an area that, what you don't know can really cause harm to you and others. So this is an area where you really have to pay close attention. I mean, it's one thing to make somebody mad because you got the paint color wrong, but that's completely different than somebody being injured on a work site or developing an occupational illness from that work. Due diligence, you should all be familiar with the concept of due diligence. Because remember, if there's ever litigation and you have to address plaintiff's attorney, they're not going to ask you, did you know there was asbestos in that wall? They're going to ask you, did you know or should have known there was asbestos in that wall? So that's something that you really need to think about. We have a duty to warn contractors. So that if there is a hazardous material or a condition in their workplace, it's our responsibility to tell them and inform them ahead of time, because communication is the best way to prevent injuries. Everybody needs to be all on the same page. As far as the regulatory environment, the amount of regulations surrounding health and safety and environmental protection are onerous. Many, many state regulations, federal regulations, local regulations. It's kind of hard to keep these straight, and a lot of them are overlapping. So that's why we're here. I mean, the department maintains expertise in these various fields, and like George mentioned previously, we are here as a resource to help you. So we want you to call upon us if you have any questions in this area. And basically, I also serve as kind of the gatekeeper for construction-related health and safety issues. So that way, if you have a question about, say, air permitting and you don't know who to call specifically at EH&S, you can contact me and I will put you in touch with the right person at the department. Now, California has developed a law. It's affectionately known as Be a Manager, Go to Jail Act. And it defines, what it does is it defines what a manager is in state law. Now, this doesn't apply to anybody in this room. I mean, we're all okay here. This more applies to somebody who knows there's a hazard in an area and intentionally does not tell somebody, and as a result somebody is injured, then that is a felony. Cal OSHA also has what's called a multi-employee worksite regulation. And what that means is that if there's an accident on a work site, there are many different types of employers that can be cited by OSHA. It can be the subcontractor whose employee was actually hurt. It could be the general contractor who has control of the site. And it can be Stanford, who basically, again, was supposed to warn the contractor of some hazard. So this kind of complicates the health and safety regulations, because before this regulation went into effect, it was pretty much the rule that general contractors were responsible for safety on their work sites. But again, you know, we want to do, California wants to do everything better than the federal government. You also should be familiar with this hazardous waste cradle-to-grave liability concept. You know, we're always looking for general contractors to offer a kind of a turnkey service where they handle everything. But it's important to realize that by law, there are certain things that as an owner, we have to handle ourselves. And this is one thing. If we generate a hazardous waste on campus, it is ours forever. It goes off, it goes to a waste site, it's in that waste site. If there's any problems in the future, a lot of you are probably familiar with the Superfund type regulations, then the government's going to kind of look at that site and determine who all put their waste in it, and then they'll go after you know, basically the deep pockets for compensation for cleanup. So third-party lawsuits are very common for hazardous materials cases. Usually these lawsuits, I shouldn't say usually, all of the lawsuits that I've been involved in the last, say, 10 or 15 years have been filed by subcontractors, employees, or contractors. These are not university employees that are suing. These are contractors that have worked on your work site. So during the pre-construction phase, it's very important that elements of the facility design guide gets into your specifications. There's a whole EH&S section in the guideline that deals with requirements and policies. And so your contractor should be aware of what our expectation is. And this also could impact their bid price, because if they feel like if they think they have to dispose of hazardous waste, which can be expensive, they're going to include that in their bid price, unless you specifically tell them that no, don't include that. And it's very important. Now, these requirements are also included in the general conditions section of all contracts, so that they are enforceable. So if you don't have if it's a small project where you don't have a full specification, I would suggest that you give the contractors this section of the contract up front so that they can review it and determine, you know, what their price should be based on. It's very important to have the contract signed before work begins, just in case something happens. This is where a lot of times what will happen is if OSHA comes on site to do an inspection, part of their investigation will be to look at the contracts and see who is responsible for what. So it's very important that this is called out succinctly in contract documents. We've developed a uniform asbestos abatement project specification that has to be used on all projects where there are asbestos impacts. And again, this is so we can approach every project uniformly in the same way. Pollution liability insurance. The type of insurance, general liability, that Steve talked about earlier will not cover claims made regarding hazardous materials. So if you're doing any kind of abatement work that involves hazardous materials, you must make sure that there is that additional coverage provided for pollution liability. Another service we offer is submittal reviews. And again, if you're designing a lab, which may have specific health and safety requirements, we are part of that plans review process that George just talked about. We'll look over those plans, make sure the safety showers are in the right place, make sure the ventilation for fume hoods is correct, things like that. All contractors have to have, by law, a site safety plan on their work site, which details how they approach safety and the procedures they're going to use to protect their workers and visitors. So again, if you are visiting one of your contractor's construction sites, you should be covered under their site plan. As a visitor or an inspector, you should be familiar with the safety requirements when going onto a work site of that nature. Everybody's got to have hard hats, safety glasses, those kinds of things. We'll also review material safety data sheets for products that they plan to use, typically in large quantity, to make sure that the materials are not extremely toxic. And if we do find materials that are extremely toxic, we would ask the contractor to substitute a material that's less toxic. If there's no product available that's as good, so they have to use that toxic product, we will ensure that they have a safety plan specifically for use of that product and how they're going to protect, Stanford visitors, anybody near the work site, students passing by, anybody else in the building. A lot of these projects take place inside occupied buildings. So that presents a little more of a challenge as far as controlling exposures to materials on a construction site. And any hazardous material contractor, an abatement contractor who works on campus, and consultants, they have to be vetted by EH&S prior to working. And so we want to make sure that they're on the up and up. Again, we'll check their license online. We'll check other certifications that we required online. In addition to the California State Licensing Board requirements that Steve mentioned earlier, there are also other government sites where you can check specialty licenses, asbestos licenses and such. So the other thing is regulatory permits and licenses. Now again, when you hire a contractor, you are looking for a turnkey operation where they will secure things like building permits, demolition permits, electrical permits, plumbing. But there are certain permits and licenses that the contractors cannot provide and that have to be obtained through Stanford University. If you're doing lab renovation where you're going to use hazardous materials, chemicals or whatever, you have to have a hazardous materials management plan. We have a standard format for that, and we can help you develop that. If you're renovating one of those laboratories, part of that permit requires a secondary, what's called a closure permit. And what the closure permit is it actually is to modify the laboratory. So the hazardous materials management plan basically covers chemical use in the entire building. And so if you're only modifying 1 or 2 labs in the building, you are modifying that permit, and that's why closure is required. Radioactive materials are special because we have basically Stanford has a site license for use of radioactive materials. And of course, there's been a lot more regulations layered on due to Homeland Security. So just realize that what you do in your project can impact others campus-wide. So you are just, part of the big picture. Biohazardous materials is another area. If you're dealing with laboratories that use infectious agents or biohazardous materials, you're going to need, the principal investigator is going to need a protocol developed that's approved by the Health and Safety Committee on campus. And that protocol is going to describe how the PI is going to deal with those infectious materials. And part of that may be facility requirements. BSL-3 are highly contained types of renovations where they have their own filtration systems. And so, again, we can help with that. Charles and Catherine mentioned earlier environmental impact reports that might have to be done through CEQA. So the first thing you want to do before anybody goes into a building, even for exploratory work, is to request a hazardous materials survey of that area. We will go in, we will do a survey of the entire area, we'll collect samples. We will identify hazards, including asbestos, lead, other things like that. That's the starting point where that information is then given to the contractor, and that's your due diligence. They have been warned. This is what we know about this area you're going to work in. And it's important to get this ahead of exploratory work. And this is one aspect that the architects or engineers say, well, we can't develop the plans until we open a little hole in this wall and look inside and see if there's a column there or a pipe there. So there's exploratory work that a lot of times goes on way ahead of the project start. And so be aware that you need to have EH&S evaluate those areas as well before even any disturbance of the material occurs. And we can also help with abatement cost estimating. If there's a lot of abatement, hazardous materials impacts to your project. Now, during the construction phase, we also offer services for management of hazardous materials abatement. So we'll do inspections to make sure the contractors set everything upright. We'll do progress inspections to make sure if there's some type of containment, that the integrity of the containment is holding up. Once the contractor's done, we'll do completion inspections of their work to make sure that they got all the hazardous material out. We may do air monitoring, and then we'll release the work area. So if there's an abatement area inside a general construction site, your general contractor is not going to go back in that area until you certify that it's safe to do so. And again, due diligence, you are the one who's certifying that it's okay for them to re-enter the area, and that's where we're here to help. If a regulatory agency inspector shows up on your work site, somebody from OSHA or somebody from EPA or maybe the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, you want to contact us immediately. You do not want to allow them access to the work site without being accompanied by someone from EH&S. Now, they know this. They're not going to be offended because you say, oh, could you please wait? I'm going to contact health and safety and have someone come over and accompany you. They are well aware that you are going to do that. You could also send them over to EH&S office. Now, don't tell them to go away because that's not going to help you out. They don't have authority to enter the work site, so if you tell them to go away, they will go away, and they will return with a warrant. So you don't want that to happen. Hazardous waste disposal. All hazardous waste must be disposed through EH&S. Contractors, again, this is part of the cradle-to-grave liability. You cannot have a contractor dispose of your hazardous waste. So we'll assist with that. We'll make sure everything is tagged correctly. We'll arrange for pickup of that waste at your site. We'll develop containers. If you need 55-gallon drums to put the waste in, we'll handle that as well. Another part of the regulations that are important is record keeping. There are certain records that need to be kept for 30 years or longer by regulation. There are some records, specifically the asbestos survey records. Building owners are required to keep those in perpetuity because, again, that's the best way. Communication is the best way to prevent exposure. So if you know something about a building, you are required to keep that information. Now here's some helpful links for our website. And then the last thing I want to emphasize is that no project is too small to impact hazardous materials. Basically this is something we see way too often on campus. The photo you're looking at is a simple recarpeting operation where the existing carpet is glued onto vinyl asbestos floor tile, and the carpet contractor goes to rip up the old carpet, and all the floor tile starts to come loose with it. Condition like this, your contractor should be aware of our policies and procedures. If they start to pull a carpet and they see tile coming with it, they should just lay the carpet back down and report it. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Aaron McCarthy, who's going to talk about the Stanford University Fire Marshal's requirements.
I'm Aaron McCarthy. I'm the Senior Fire Protection Engineer at the Stanford Fire Marshal's Office. It's part of EH&S. We have about 21 people, engineers, inspectors, and technicians. We do the fire safety maintenance on sprinkler systems, the alarm systems, and the extinguishers. So there's a lot to cover, and we're a very busy office. We're located, like I said, within the H&S over at Oak Road, completely the other side of campus, so a lot of people don't always get over in that area. I'm standing in for my boss, Joe Lee Young. He's a university fire marshal, and he's really our main contact. He directs everything that goes on in our office. Basically, our office is, and as regards to the project delivery process, we offer technical assistance to you, the project managers, architects, your project team. We get involved in right from the beginning. A lot of you know me, know our office already. These are the things, main things we talk about. Code compliance and consultation is really kind of the heart of what we do. Plans review, George covered that very well. We get involved very early on in the process from schematic design all the way through. On departmentally projects, a lot of times the process moves along pretty quickly, so it's challenging for us, but we try to stay up with that. But it's a very critical part of what we do, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And renovations that generally on the departmentally managed project level involves fire system shutdowns. And there's more to that than just shutting off a system. Our systems are code required for all the occupants in the building. So that's something we have to kind of work through with your project team, how that's going to be done. We do inspections of any changes to the systems, alarm and sprinkler systems. And the last two items here are probably more geared to your projects than the larger projects. The small project program specifically came out of work, departmentally managed projects, and minor systems modification, and that's modifications to fire alarm and fire sprinkler systems. Again, all designed to keep the permit process going very fast. That's what those two are designed for. I'll get into that in a little bit. Again, we provide technical support to the project team, and the issues that have come up recently, for many years, there was a certain set of codes in California called the uniform codes. That changed in 2008. Because of a process in this country, and actually internationally as well, they're trying to consolidate a lot of the code bodies. They did that here. They did that here in this country, and the international codes became the codes for California, and that brought a lot of changes, We're still feeling those changes. So we have done a lot of training to get up to speed and feel like we really are much more up to speed now. So that has brought significant challenges to our institution, Stanford here. There are some things that have impacted the entire campus, more than a couple things. So we try to help with those kind of things, make you aware of them early as it pertains to your projects. Plans review is the cornerstone of that. We really try to catch things in two ways. One, make sure Stanford's complying with the codes, and as Kip showed, there are many codes to deal with. Building code started out early in the 20s. It was a book about that thick and about that big. There's 12 volumes of building and fire mechanical codes now that are this thick and that big. They're huge. There's just so many codes out there. And so it's very challenging. One of the other challenging points is that contractors, a lot of time, and architects, they don't always they put things in there they don't have to put in there. And that's for various reasons. We try to catch those things. It reduces the cost of your projects. And for a departmentally managed project, that can be significant. Even $1,000, a couple $1,000 makes a difference. It might allow you to buy another piece of furniture or do something else in your project. So that's something we really try to do, as well as make sure there's compliance. And we know it's going to comply before it goes to the county. That's what we really try to stress, or the city of Palo Alto. We do coordinate plans review from other groups within the H&S, mostly occupational health, and some laser safety folks get involved a bit early, and then radiation as well. Kip, I think you do a lot of plan review. I think he does plan review more directly with the project managers, because I don't see his letters. We don't and forward them on. As part of this process of plan review and providing a code consultation, we liaison, and mainly with the county groups, the county fire group and the county building group, to try to reach negotiation on an interpretation that sometimes can be very challenging, especially for a DMP project, because it could have such a big impact. So that's one of our roles, is to liaison with them, because we know the code language, we kind of know what they're thinking, and try to reach a more reasonable interpretation. we participate in many of the internal project meetings, and we kind of have to get a sense and keep up with what is happening with the project. We also get involved in hazardous materials, a little bit of different angle on it. Most of you probably have lab buildings, and this is where it comes into play. The labs have to have, they have a limit on how much hazardous material they can have in them. And we have to run a report to show that they will comply with that. And so there's a link at our website, sufmo.stanford.edu, that those links are all there. And you have to submit a request, and then we will begin the process of developing that report. It goes in the permit set of drawings, so your drawings won't go anywhere until it's in there. So that's kind of a critical path item for lab renovations, which a lot of you will be doing. As well, on renovation projects, as well as this hazardous material summary report that we need to provide, we have to coordinate the shutdowns of a fire alarm or fire sprinkler systems. Almost every one of your renovation projects is going to have that to one degree or another. Most of our major buildings are sprinklered. If you're taking a wall down, it can affect a sprinkler system. If you're putting one up, it does the same thing. It can also affect an extinguisher location or an alarm device. So it's critical we get involved in that, because we have to make sure the remaining occupants of the building that are going to be in the building have a fully functional sprinkler system and alarm system, and of course extinguishers. And shutdown basically is done through our technicians. The physical shutdown of the devices are done through our technician group, and they work. They're a charge out group, and so again, our website has the work request form for that. The engineers also do inspections on a change of a sprinkler system or an alarm system. So we go out, we'll look at it, make sure it's compliant hopefully before the county comes out or Palo Alto comes out, so the inspection kind of goes very smoothly. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's the intent. And if it doesn't, we then can we're with the county when they come out, or the city of Palo Alto, and we can deal with any questions that come up. And many, many times we can resolve the issue right there on the spot, and the project keeps moving forward. Okay, the small projects program is, like I said, this is something that specifically really you guys we'll deal with all the time. It was established in '95 through our office. The whole intent was you could almost get an over-the-counter permit for your building permit. That happens a lot. Doesn't happen all the time, but basically for certain types of projects, no exiting changes, the building use, the area, the use of the room or rooms you're working with don't change, no hazardous materials. Usually those can be processed very quickly. We have to approve them. They go to the county building office. They either will look at them and approve them over the counter, or it'll happen very quickly. County fire marshal's office doesn't have to look at them, and that's the big plus, because that lead time is at least 30 days, and nowadays it's much longer than that. It's probably more like 60 days now. So that's the whole intent of that program, and it's very, very successful. And we had a little lull in it, and it didn't work. We had some change of people over at the county offices. Now it's working very well again. So I just want to make sure that please call our office, because it really can save you a lot of time and costs, really. Let's see. So obviously the advantages. Yeah, give us a call, and we can tell you if your projects qualify. This one kind of fell out of the small projects program. The small projects program, again, established in '95. Part of it was changes to sprinkler systems and alarm systems. That was built into that program. Well, there was only 3 devices that qualified, which really did help us, but not as much as more devices would help us. So we came up with with the county fire marshal's office, we came to an agreement in 2008 that we can change 10 devices of either system and not need a county fire review. And contractors still have to pull an over-the-counter permit. We approve the plans in our office, put our stamp on them, we write a letter. That contractor then takes it down to the county, and they get a permit right over the counter. And that saves 30 days at least right there. So that's been very successful. And 10 devices that's pretty significant. It covers most departmentally managed projects. It won't cover all of them, but it covers a very, very large, most of them. That's basically, as far as departmentally managed projects, most of how we get involved and what our role is. These are helpful links to our websites, the CBC request form, which is the chemical hazard summary report I mentioned before. The minor system modification link there is actually to the county offices and because it's their program. So that it'll give you all the details for that. And then again, the bottom one is for a work request for a project, like a shutdown or plans review, things like that. And next, I'll introduce Famida Ahmed from Sustainability and Utilities.
Good morning. How are you? So I have a very short presentation for you today, and just to keep things going, there will actually be a quiz in the end, and whoever can answer that question, or if there are quite a few who can, then there will be t-shirts mailed to your address, so listen up. So Sustainability and Energy Management as a department came together in 2007 when sustainability became a very important issue to campus. Not that it wasn't before, but there was a new focus to it, which is that from a special interest, it would become a core value for campus. It's run by the executive director, Joseph Stagner, and the departments within utilities, which includes water services, parking and transportation, my little program, Office of Sustainability, and various other energy efficiency programs came under one administrative roof, and that's how it became known as Sustainability and Energy Management. So it's my pleasure to highlight some key points that are important to you on behalf of my colleagues. Just focus on three things. There is one form that I will talk about today, which is Utility and Road Service Request Form. We've tried to collect all the information and put it in one space. Some of the major considerations within that, that's also in the form that I'll highlight a little bit more specifically, and then end the presentation with some core or key aspects of sustainability as far as programs are concerned when new design come into place. So, a few years ago, we've put together this new utility service application. It literally looks like this, quite simple. And what it is essentially a checklist that you and your teams can go through, which will go over all the areas that should be considered. Some of it may not even be relevant, but chances are a good majority of them would be. So very quickly, they are the different services that the department provides: the chilled water service, hot water service, electric service information. After Hurricane Sandy, we all know how important these are. Domestic water service, lake irrigation water service, sanitary sewer service information, storm drain service, and other utility services. So it's actually quite an interesting form to go through, and we encourage you to come to that. That's what the link on the website here is about. And while we are also putting a lot of the information together and provide this one-stop shop, it's also a evolving process. So if you notice something that could also be in here, don't hesitate to pass that on to us. It's in the form, but the key considerations I talked about that are worth going over twice. This is really about assuring that we will have the utility capacity to serve the projects. As Kip mentioned, no project is too small, and all the considerations that apply to major projects are true for small or smaller projects as well. So it's the understanding of the total capacity that's asked, and for our department to ensure that that indeed can be provided in time for the services and the programs that you're putting together to support the academic mission of the university. Environmental protection and hazardous waste, we learned quite a bit today, but especially when it comes to utility work, if there are leaks, if you anticipate moving hazardous chemicals, that's where our department also works closely with EH&S and making sure that if that happens on site or during construction or planning, that's part of this form as well, so it's worth noticing that twice. Facility Design Guideline, FDG, has all this information, but especially how the current infrastructure is today in terms of the maps, the utility infrastructure, a fascinating place to go and see how things are today. So when the new programs are coming together, it provides an excellent context and background. And one thing that my boss wanted to make sure that I especially mentioned today is that start-stop of utility metering and billing for any new project can only be done by us. And advance notice really helps. At least 2 days, preferably a lot more, which is the information in the form. But that's really important to notice and remember. Contractors cannot do it. That responsibility could be delegated to other project teams within LBRE that we're working with. but the source of that turnkey really resides within utility services, which is within our department. The last set of considerations is about sustainability. So in the last few years, the campus has really moved away in a positive direction from sustainability being a special interest to a core value. And all projects, big or small, they actually impact the university sustainability rating. We now belong as a university to various consortiums, whether it's IV+, or ASHE, which stands for Association for Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, and various third party that more and more aggressively evaluate all academic institutions for their overall sustainability performance, which includes energy, water, waste, information systems, transportation, as well as behavioral programs and administrative capacity to support all these programs. So anything that happens on campus, when we are putting together the reports at the end of the year and the metrics at the end of the year, it shows up, it's felt. So just please acknowledge that and know that sustainability is a core consideration, and the metrics that we follow now really detects any changes or changes in balance for the positive direction we want to take in terms of reducing our environmental footprint. Specifically, I think we all know by now that through the Department of Project Management and others in LBRE, we have the Sustainable Buildings Guidelines. It's printed out, it's available on website, one of the many guidelines that are available today. But it mentions some key tools, such as life cycle cost assessment, material reuse and selection, and construction material and recycling. For all of your projects, these are highly relevant and often creative sources of information when you're trying to program some sort of a sustainability element into the new space you're considering. And then after the program is designed and thought of, the operational considerations of sustainability. How are we going to design the space inside, the recycling services, the composting services, the behavioral programs that we can take towards energy and water conservation programs. That's where our office is a real resource to you. We have a small group of very dynamic and dedicated people who support sustainability as a core value to the university. And food systems, if you're designing a program that has kitchen or kitchenettes, you know, what's going to happen to that flow of food and waste is very important as well. And communications to occupants. Everything that is new and existing today, the fact that they reside within Stanford boundaries and part of the sustainability mission, it's really rewarding to be able to communicate that to the occupants, the programs, the students, and they seem to take well to that. So with that, I leave you with our office and departmental website, sustainable.stanford.edu. And here are the helpful links that we have repeated. It's both accessible through LBRE, Sustainable Stanford, which is our public website, and a lot of this information is as part of the facilities design guide. And contacts, of course, you can contact Joe Stagner or myself. We work very closely with all our group leads and group directors within the department, but we're encouraging that if you have questions, you send to Elsa Baez, who supports Joe Stagner directly and might be able to further direct you for specific utility questions. Coming back to the form I pointed out, this also has one person's contact information, Scott Gould, who actually first receives the form and routes it within the university to go over all those utility services I talked about. Ready for the quiz? It's a fill in the blank. Sustainability is a dash dash at Stanford. So many people said that. Okay, who? Can you raise your hand so I can collect your name? Okay. I will come talk to you after this presentation to get your address. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to introduce Jean McCowan, who's the Director of Government and Community Relations at Stanford.
Thank you, Famita. Our Office of Government and Community Relations handles for the university all manner of federal, state, and local government issues. for Stanford. We also handle community relations, which is a broader area of interest and of great importance to Stanford. The 8,000 acres of Stanford land are in 2 counties and 4 cities. And so we have a lot of neighbors and a lot of local government entities who are influenced by those neighbors. The area of your work in departmentally managed projects also has a lot of internal neighbors, so to speak, communities on campus that are equally important. And they are interested in how the work you're doing, the work that you're leading as project managers, may impact them. And obviously their greatest concern is always, is this going to be disruptive to me, inconvenient to me, bothersome, whatever. And the categories are very obvious. You know them all. It's noise, dust, parking, traffic issues. And again, they're, depending on the size and the location of projects, your judgment may be that's actually not going to be that much in play. You have to make a judgment on each on a case-by-case basis whether you're going to have those kinds of consequences. One of the areas that our office hears about most frequently are the consequences that trickle off the edges of the campus. And the main neighbors of ours that we hear from are the on the other side of Stanford Avenue, College Terrace neighborhood. And so that comes into play most often with summertime projects being done over in the housing areas, painters coming for a few weeks for jobs that are quick and need to get done, who periodically will find it easier to park in the neighborhood than park where they're supposed to be parking on campus, and we'll get calls about that. College Terrace now, if you don't know this, I'll just tell you, has now got a daytime parking restriction. You can only park on the streets if you don't have a permit as a resident there for 2 hours at a time. So we'll probably get fewer calls there because that's not going to be a good place for employees to park. But across El Camino, there's another neighborhood, Evergreen Park. A couple of summers ago, I got a call from a neighbor saying he was noticing early in the morning, a lot of cars would show up on his street, and people that he thought were painters because they were wearing white clothes would get out of their cars and wait, and somebody came over with a van and picked them all up and drove them onto campus. Well, so we obviously figured out how to get a hold of the appropriate people in R&DE to, track down what was going on there and get that addressed. The other main point I want to make is about how you communicate about a project that you think may have an impact. And what I'm sure you all know, and this is obvious, I'll say it, is that if people are inconvenienced, they can tolerate that quite a bit better if you told them about it in advance. If you gave them the heads up that this is going to be happening, we know it's going to be inconvenient, we're going to be doing our best to mitigate that as much as we can. Here's roughly when we think, here's when we'll start, and this is when we think we'll be done, and we'll keep you posted on the progress. There's different ways to do that. Obviously, if it's a small group inside a building, that's one thing. If it's neighbors outside of campus, that's another, and we can certainly be helpful to any of you if that situation presents itself for you. Larger projects on campus, I'll give you one example. When the Munger Graduate Student Housing was built, that project actually created a website, created a complaint line, a complaint form on the website so people could comment on issues that they were experiencing, and obviously signage on major projects is now kind of the standard approach, to have a project manager's name, a telephone number, a place that somebody can immediately get a hold of someone and let us know. And in the Munger case, there was an initial bump in the heavy construction phases, mostly from the students who lived nearby who regularly communicated on the website, do you really have to start at 8 in the morning? That just doesn't work really well for me. And the project manager in that case did a lot of work with pizza delivery, periodically along the way, because that seemed to work. So our office, again, we're happy to be a resource both internally with tools and certainly externally. Please don't hesitate to call me or our Associate Director, Lucy Wicks, who's here today, if you need any kind of help in your projects. Thank you.